Hello friends, this video on digestion and absorption part 16 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. So now the question is, how are these simplest form of the biomolecules get absorbed in the small intestine? Because we say that small intestine is the site where absorption of nutrients from food take place. So we have to see how that absorption part is taken care in small intestine. Okay, so for absorption, it does not occur in duodenum. It occurs in the jejunum and ileum part of the small intestine, as I have mentioned before also. Now, if you look at the structure-wise, why jejunum and ileum are better for absorption? That is because both of them are highly coiled structures, and coiled structures are better for absorption. Why? Now, let me give you an example. Let us suppose you are given this much of space and you are given a wire or you are given a thread which can, and if you take the thread and you have to arrange that thread in this area. Now there is one option that you keep the thread straight inside this area just like this. So how much length of the thread will you be able to accommodate in the space? Let us suppose if you keep the thread straight here, you are able to accommodate 1 meter of thread. Now let us suppose you take the same thread and you coil it like this and you place it inside the same space. So your space is still the same. You are given the same amount of space. But now if you actually look at the length of the wire that you could accommodate in the same space, maybe it is some 6 meters. Because you have coiled it badly and you have utilized the space completely, right? Now the exact thing happens in case of small intestine. Now in the small intestine, the entire small intestine has small outgrowth called the villi, right? And those villi actually help in absorption of nutrients. That means throughout the length of the greater the length of the small intestine, the greater would be the absorption. Now, in order to increase the absorption, the more and more length of the tube has been accommodated, and to accommodate more and more length of the tube, it has been coiled like this. So, in this case, if this is your small intestine, so in this case, the absorption will be only on this 1 meter length. But here in this case, the absorption will be on the 6 meter length. So, the absorption will be more in this case. Right? So if the tube is placed in coiled manner, then the absorption will also increase, and that is why if you compare the three parts of the small intestine, you will see that jejunum and ileum are more coiled when compared to duodenum. That is because in duodenum absorption does not take place, only digestion takes place, whereas in jejunum and ileum absorption takes place, and absorption increases due to coiling of the intestine. Clear? So that is one part. So now what we mean to say is complete digestion happened in duodenum, and then the digested food, the simplest form, reaches the ileum and jejunum. So there all absorption takes place, so a complete absorption takes place, and then the undigested substances, those substances which could not be digested by the small intestine, all those are passed into the large intestine. So that is what happens in the small intestine as far as absorption is concerned. Now let us look at the process of absorption even more closely. Now the question is, what all needs to be absorbed in the small intestine? Obviously the products of complete digestion. And what were the products of complete digestion? The end products of digestion were amino acids, monosaccharides, bases, fatty acids, glycerol, water, and electrolytes. So these are some of the things which need to be absorbed. So now we will see where and how they get absorbed. What is the mechanism that is followed for the absorption of all these end products of digestion. So now let us look at the various mechanisms by which absorption of the various substances can take place. Now some of the important mechanisms are osmosis, simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and active transport. I am sure none of these are new terms because we have already discussed about all of these in one of our previous lessons. So what is osmosis? As we all know, osmosis is a term which is used for transport of water. So when water needs to be absorbed, it moves from region of higher concentration towards region of lower concentration, and by this mechanism water is absorbed. If you think of simple diffusion, it is again movement of substances from region of higher towards lower concentration by itself. So the substance can itself pass across the membrane from higher to lower concentration. Now what all substances are absorbed by the process of simple diffusion? Electrolytes, some of the electrolytes, monosaccharides and amino acids are absorbed by this mechanism. Facilitated diffusion. Now, sometimes it so happens that this is also a type of diffusion where movement will occur from region of higher to lower concentration. But sometimes some substances cannot move on their own. They need some carrier ions. So that type of diffusion is called facilitated diffusion because they need some facilitator who will carry them across the membrane. So movement of substances across the concentration gradient by carrier ions. So carrier ions play a very important role here. So what substances are absorbed by this mechanisms? Again, some of the amino acids and fructose. Now again, see, when I say amino acids, there are many different amino acids. Not all of them are of exact similar nature. Some of them are polar, some of them are non-polar. So based on their structure, based on their nature, it depends whether they can diffuse by simple diffusion or they need facilitated diffusion. And the last one is active transport, where movement occurs against the concentration gradient. That means the substances are moved from region of lower concentration towards higher concentration by providing some extra energy from outside. So that is active transport. So there are few things like some of the amino acids, again some monosaccharides and electrolytes are absorbed into blood by means of active transport. Like they are transported to blood where their concentration is already high, but still they are absorbed into blood. So that happens by the phenomenon of active transport. So these are some of the mechanisms by which absorption of various end products of digestion take place. So now the question is, where absorption take place? So does all absorption occur in small intestine? Because as I was telling that small intestine is the main site where nutrients from the foods is absorbed. But does that mean that the entire process of absorption take place only in small intestine? Well, to be very clear, not exactly. Absorption occurs in different parts of the digestive tract. So in the many other parts also absorption take place. But then again, most of the absorption or maximum absorption occurs in small intestine. So a very little absorption takes place in the oral cavity. A very little absorption again takes place in the stomach. Again, a very small amount of absorption takes place also in the large intestine. But please remember that all these absorption are very minimum in quantities. And if you talk about the absorption of nutrients specifically, then the nutrients absorption specifically take place only in the small intestine. So let us see then what type of absorption take place in oral cavity, stomach and large intestine. So if you talk about mouth or the oral cavity, so as I said, these are all the places where some absorption take place. If you talk about mouth, certain drugs which might be present in the food, that absorption can take place. Stomach, water and simple sugar. So if you see, water is something that might get absorbed in other sites as well. Otherwise, little bit of simple sugars. Small intestine, maximum absorption of nutrients. Whether you talk about simple sugars or you talk about the fatty acids or the amino acids or glycerol, everything get absorbed into the bloodstream in small intestine. So all the nutrients get absorbed here. Large intestine, water and some minerals. So as I said, water is something which can be transported or which can be absorbed by means of osmosis in other regions as well. And since small intestine is the one who actively takes part in the absorption, that is why the structure of small intestine is also apt for absorption. If you see the structures like villi or microvilli, they are present only in small intestine so that they can increase the surface area to facilitate more and more absorption. The structure of the small intestine is also highly coiled, and this highly coiled structure also favors absorption. So because of the structure of the small intestine also favors the process of absorption. So that is why absorption takes place, the maximum absorption takes place in the small intestine alone. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.